My sister left my toddler nephew home alone for 3 days while partying in Vegas, then faked his urgent medical emergency to trick me into canceling my honeymoon so I could rush home and babysit him. When I filed charges, she hired her lawyer brother to paint me as an unstable kidnapper in court, so I destroyed her life in every way imaginable. My sister Megan had always talked about being the cool mom. Growing up, she'd constantly say her kids would be her best friends, how she'd never be uptight like other parents. So when Liam was born, I expected her to be obsessed, and for a while she was. Always bought new storybooks, took dozens of pictures of him, spent hours memorizing dinosaur names. But on his 4th birthday, Megan got him the worst birthday gift of all time. She abandoned him. I still remember her calling me in tears, telling me she just wanted to drop him off at the fire station and let the universe deal with him. And instead of yelling at her or telling her she was a bad person, I asked if she wanted me to babysit more often. You see, Megan was a single mom who had just gotten out of her postpartum depression, so I figured that if I just helped more, then everything would be okay. And for a while it was. I started with 1 weekend a month, then once a week, then almost every single evening. Liam was like the son I never had. Fast forward to last month. Megan asked if I could watch Liam while she went to Vegas for a bachelorette party. But here's the kicker. Ryan, my husband of 2 years, had planned for our honeymoon to be during that time. 2 years married, 2 years saving every penny. Plus, I had given Megan 4 months notice. So I said no. To my surprise, she didn't even seem mad. Just laughed it off like she realized she was in the wrong and said she'd find someone else. I should have known Megan would never be so quick to admit she had made a mistake. I was fast asleep at 3 a.m. when my phone vibrated so hard it almost fell off my table. When I saw Megan's name, I answered immediately. She was literally crying her eyes out and couldn't form proper sentences. She said I needed to come back right now because her son Liam had been hurt. That's all I needed to hear to start packing my bags. But then Megan continued. Liam had been hit by a drunk driver, and they had to airlift him to perform open brain surgery at the children's hospital. And obviously Megan needed me. Everything happened in a blur. We packed through tears, begged airlines for emergency seats, watched $8,000 in non-refundable bookings vanish. On the flight, I tried to get in contact with Megan, but she was ghosting me. No text, no call, nothing. As soon as me and Ryan landed in JFK Airport, I called the children's hospital to see if Liam had been admitted. The nurse told me she wasn't seeing any pediatric trauma patients by that name. Adrenaline filled my veins. We called 6 hospitals. Nothing. Megan's phone was still going straight to voicemail, so we did what any responsible adults would do in that situation. We broke into her home using the spare key under her mat, except the door was already unlocked. And when I walked in, I expected to see Liam lying in bed with Megan standing over him. But no, we found him sitting on the couch, playing on his tablet surrounded by empty cereal bowls, completely uninjured. As soon as he saw us, he wrapped his arms around my waist and practically started cheering. Yay! Hello! I peeled him off of me and gently asked where his mommy was. She left 3 days ago. She told me she couldn't afford a babysitter, but that you would be back from your vacation soon to take care of me. So you didn't get into any accidents or injuries? Ryan asked, trying to wrap his head around everything. No, why would I be hurt? I can take care of myself, Liam responded, joyful as ever. My blood went cold. I called Megan from her landline, and this time she picked up. The first thing I heard was the song California Girls blaring in the background. Hey, what's up? She asked, slurring her words together. What the F is going on, Megan? What do you mean? She asked, as if playing dumb would work in this situation. You told me Liam was in surgery. I was then interrupted by the sound of Megan cackling like a witch. Ha ha ha. I knew if I lied, then you wouldn't come back. You were being super extra about your honeymoon. Must be nice having money to throw around while single moms struggle. Behind me, Liam asked in a small voice if he could live with us. He said Mom didn't want him anymore. Megan must have heard him through the phone because her tone shifted instantly, venomous and cruel. She accused me of turning her son against her and said this had been my plan all along. That's when I finally realized Megan wasn't some misunderstood single mother. She was a washed up, irresponsible, self-absorbed sociopath. And I was ready to make her pay. I hung up on her mid-rant. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. Ryan was already in the kitchen making Liam a proper meal. The kid had been living on cereal for 3 days. 3 whole days alone. He was 4 years old. I sat down next to Liam and tried to keep my voice calm. I asked him if he'd been scared. He shrugged and said Mommy told him he was a big boy now. Said she'd done it before when I was busy. My stomach dropped. This wasn't the first time. I pulled out my phone and called child services right there. The lady on the other end sounded tired, like she'd heard it all before. She took down all the information and said someone would come by tomorrow. Tomorrow wasn't good enough for me. I told her a 4-year-old had been abandoned for 3 days. She said since he had food and shelter, it needed to go through proper channels, but assured me they'd prioritize the case. I wanted to scream. Ryan finished making mac and cheese and brought it over. Liam ate like he hadn't seen real food in days. Between bites, he told us about how he'd been too scared to go outside, how he'd run out of milk on day 2, how he'd tried calling me but didn't know my number by heart. Each detail made me angrier. After dinner, we gave him a bath and put him in our guest room. He fell asleep clutching my hand. Ryan and I stayed up all night discussing what to do. We couldn't just leave him here when Megan got back, but we also couldn't legally take him. We were stuck. The next morning, a social worker named Martha showed up. She was maybe 50, wearing a wrinkled blazer and carrying a clipboard. She interviewed Liam gently, asking about his time alone. He told her everything he told us. She took notes and photos of the empty fridge and the mess. Then she pulled me aside. She said they'd open a case but warned me these things take time. Megan would get a chance to explain herself. The system favored keeping families together. I told her that was bullpoop. She just shrugged and said that's how it works. 2 days passed. Liam stayed with us and we fell into a routine. Breakfast, cartoons, lunch at the park, afternoon nap, dinner, bath, bed. It felt natural. Right. Ryan was amazing with him, reading stories and teaching him card games. On the 3rd day, Megan showed up at our door. She looked like hell. Hair greasy, makeup smeared, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. She demanded Liam back immediately. I stood in the doorway and told her no. She tried to push past me, but Ryan stepped up behind me. Megan started screaming about her rights as a mother, said we were kidnapping her son. The neighbors came out to watch. I stayed calm and told her to leave or I'd call the cops. She laughed and said go ahead, said she'd already called them herself. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers got out looking bored. Megan ran up to them crying, saying we'd stolen her baby. The officers separated us to get both sides. I explained everything. The abandonment, the lies about the accident, the 3 days alone. I showed them my phone records, the calls to hospitals. They nodded and took notes. Then they went inside to talk to Liam. He was coloring at the kitchen table. When they asked if he wanted to go home with Mommy, he shook his head hard. Said he wanted to stay with Aunt Emma and Uncle Ryan. Said Mommy left him alone and he was scared. The officers exchanged looks. They came back outside and told Megan she needed to leave. Said this was a civil matter now, not criminal. Told her to work it out with child services. She lost it completely. Started screaming that I'd brainwashed him, that I'd always been jealous of her, that I couldn't have kids so I was stealing hers. The officers warned her to calm down. She didn't. They ended up putting her in the back of the patrol car to cool off. Before they drove away, one officer pulled me aside. He said to document everything. Take pictures, save texts, record calls if legal in our state. Said I'd need it. I knew then this was just the beginning. Megan wasn't going to give up easy. She'd rather destroy everything than admit she was wrong. But I looked back at Liam, peacefully coloring at our table. evil and knew I'd fight. He deserved better than her. He deserved a real family, and I was going to make sure he got one. The next morning, I woke up to 27 missed calls, all from Megan. My phone screen glowed accusingly in the dim morning light, each notification a reminder of the storm I'd unleashed. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I already knew what they'd say. Threats, manipulation, fake tears, and promises she'd never keep. The same toxic cocktail she'd been serving for years. Ryan made pancakes while Liam watched cartoons, his small body curled up on our couch like he belonged there. The smell of butter and syrup filled our kitchen, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Liam giggled at something on TV, and Ryan hummed while he cooked. For about an hour, I let myself believe this could work. Then the doorbell rang. It was Megan's brother Derek, wearing his fancy lawyer suit that probably cost more than our mortgage payment. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and his smile was sharp as a blade. He handed me an envelope with theatrical formality and said I'd been served. The paper felt heavy in my hands, like it was made of lead instead of trees. I opened it right there on my doorstep, my fingers trembling slightly. Custody petition. Emergency hearing scheduled for next week. The legal language swam before my eyes, but the meaning was crystal clear. Derek smirked and said Megan had hired him to get her son back. Said I didn't stand a chance against a real lawyer. Said blood was thicker than water, and judges always sided with biological mothers. I slammed the door in his face hard enough to rattle the windows. I spent the rest of the day calling lawyers, my fingers cramping from dialing so many numbers. Most wanted $5,000 just to start, speaking in smooth professional voices that turned cold when I mentioned payment plans. We had maybe $2,000 in savings after the ruined honeymoon we'd had to cancel when Liam came to stay. I found one guy named Paul who'd take payments. He sounded young but eager, his voice cracking slightly when he talked about fighting for children's rights. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown, while Ryan watched Liam at the park. Paul looked even younger in person, maybe fresh out of law school, with an ill-fitting suit and an earnest expression. His briefcase was new, the leather still stiff, but he listened carefully and took detailed notes in surprisingly neat handwriting. He said we had a good case, but warned me Derek was known for playing dirty. Said to expect surprises in court, things that would make me angry, things that weren't true but sounded believable. I asked what kind of surprises. He just shook his head and said to document everything, every text, every call, every interaction. That night, Liam had nightmares that shook the whole house. He kept crying for his mom, then pushing me away when I tried to comfort him, his small fists batting at my hands. It broke my heart into a million pieces. The kid was so confused, caught between loving his mother and knowing she'd left him. In the morning, he apologized for being bad, his voice so small I could barely hear it. His eyes were puffy from crying, and he wouldn't meet my gaze. I told him he wasn't bad, just scared, and that was okay. He asked if mommy was mad at him, twisting his dinosaur pajama top in his tiny hands. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that his mom is a selfish disaster who chose Vegas over him? You don't. You just hug him and make breakfast scrambled eggs with cheese, just how he likes them. The week flew by in a blur of preparation and anxiety. I took time off work to prepare for court, using vacation days I'd been saving for something happier. Paul had me write down everything I could remember about Megan's parenting. The missed pickups where Liam waited at preschool until the teachers called me. The forgotten birthdays where I'd rushed out to buy cakes and presents so he wouldn't know his mom forgot. The times she'd shown up hammered, stumbling and slurring while Liam hid behind my legs. It filled 12 pages of careful documentation, each incident dated and detailed. Ryan took photos of Liam's room at our house versus his room at Megan's. Ours had books and toys and clean sheets, walls covered in his artwork that we'd framed like museum pieces. Hers had a bare mattress and empty beer cans, cigarette burns in the carpet, and windows so dirty you couldn't see through them. We thought we were ready. We weren't even close. The morning of the hearing, I put on my best dress, a navy blue one I'd worn to job interviews. Professional, but not severe. Ryan wore his only suit, the one from our wedding, now a bit tight around the middle. We dropped Liam at my friend Nicole's house, a cheerful place that smelled like fresh cookies and had 3 dogs for him to play with. He clung to me at the door, his fingers twisted in my dress, begging not to go back to mommy's house. His fear was a living thing, radiating from his small body. I promised him everything would be okay, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. I hoped I wasn't lying. The courthouse was old and intimidating, all marble and dark wood, designed to make regular people feel small. Paul met us outside, looking nervous and adjusting his tie repeatedly. He said Derek had filed additional documents that morning, thick manila folders that made my stomach drop. Wouldn't say what was in them, just told us to stay calm no matter what happened, to let him do the talking. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room than the grand halls of justice from TV. It smelled like old paper and floor polish. Megan sat at the other table wearing a conservative dress I'd never seen before, probably borrowed from someone with better sense. Her hair was neat, pulled back in a modest bun, makeup subtle and maternal. She looked like a different person, like someone had dressed up a wolf in sheep's clothing. Derek sat beside her in an expensive suit that screamed success and reliability. The judge was an older woman with gray hair pulled back severely and tired eyes that had seen too many family disasters. She read through the papers while we waited, occasionally making notes with a gold pen. The silence was suffocating. Finally, she looked up over her reading glasses and asked Derek to present his case. Derek stood and launched into a speech about a loving mother being denied her child, his voice rich with false sympathy. He painted Megan as a struggling single mom who'd made one mistake, overwhelmed by the pressures of modern parenthood. Said she'd been exhausted and asked her sister for help, a moment of vulnerability twisted into abandonment. Said I'd agreed to babysit for a few days, then refused to return Liam, turning a family favor into a kidnapping. The judge took notes, her expression unreadable. Then Derek dropped the bomb. He submitted documents showing I'd been treated for depression 5 years ago after a bad breakup. Said I was mentally unstable, prone to erratic behavior, unfit to care for a child. The papers made a soft thud as they hit the judge's desk. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands going cold. How did he even get those records? They were supposed to be confidential. Paul objected immediately, saying the records were irrelevant and obtained through improper channels, his voice rising with indignation. The judge said she'd review them for relevance but would need to verify their authenticity, adding them to her growing pile of evidence. Derek continued, presenting character statements from 3 of Megan's friends' women I recognized as her drinking buddies, all saying what a devoted mother she was, how she lived for Liam. All lies wrapped in legal language, but they sounded convincing, professionally written. Then he called Megan to testify. She walked to the stand slowly, playing up the grieving mother angle. She cried on cue, talking about how much she missed her baby, how empty her arms felt without him, how I'd always been jealous of her, jealous that she had a child, jealous of her freedom, jealous of everything, how I'd turned Liam against her with lies and bribes. She was good, really good. If I didn't know better, I'd almost believe her myself. Her tears looked real, her voice cracked at just the right moments. When Paul's turn came, he presented our evidence methodically. The photos, the documentation, the frantic calls to hospitals when Megan disappeared. He had me testify about finding Liam alone, describing the terror in his eyes when I found him, about the pyramid of cereal bowls and empty fridge, about him saying he was being a big boy and taking care of himself, about Megan laughing from Vegas, the sound of slot machines in the background while her son sat hungry and alone. The judge seemed interested but not convinced, tapping her pen thoughtfully. She asked why I hadn't called child services immediately when Megan first started leaving Liam with me so often. I explained that I was trying to help my sister, trying to keep the family together, trying to protect Liam from the system. She nodded, but I could tell it wasn't enough. My explanation sounded weak even to my own ears. Then Paul called his witness, Martha, the social worker who'd responded to the wellness check. She testified about finding Liam alone and scared, how he'd been too frightened to open the door at first, about the condition of Megan's house, the overflowing trash, the empty beer bottles, the lack of food suitable for a child, about Liam saying this wasn't the first time Mommy left him alone, that he knew how to use the microwave and where the cereal was kept. Derek objected repeatedly, claiming hearsay and bias, but Martha held firm. She'd been doing this for 20 years. She knew neglect when she saw it, and she'd seen plenty. The judge listened carefully, making extensive notes. When Martha finished, things felt more balanced, but I could see Megan whispering urgently to Derek, her facade cracking. They had something else planned. Derek stood for his closing argument, straightening his tie like an actor preparing for his big scene. He acknowledged Megan had made mistakes, but said she deserved another chance, that everyone deserved redemption. Then he dropped another bomb. He claimed I'd been giving Liam alcohol, letting him sip beer at family gatherings, said a neighbor had seen it happen multiple times. I nearly jumped out of my chair, my whole body going rigid with shock. Paul grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in, reminding me to stay calm. The judge asked for evidence, her eyebrows raised skeptically. Derek said the witness was outside, ready to testify. The judge considered for a moment, then allowed it. In walked Megan's neighbor, an older man named Thomas who reeked of cigarette smoke. I recognized him vaguely. He lived 2 houses down from Megan and always seemed to be watching from his window. He testified that he'd seen me give Liam beer at a barbecue in Megan's backyard. Said the boy was stumbling around hammered while I laughed. It was complete fiction. We'd never even had a barbecue at Megan's house. I avoided going there whenever possible. Paul cross-examined him hard, his young voice gaining strength. Asked for dates, times, details. What kind of beer? What was Liam wearing? Who else was there? Thomas fumbled with his answers, contradicting himself, sweating under the fluorescent lights. It was obvious he was lying, but damage was done. The judge looked concerned, doubt creeping into her expression. She said she needed time to review everything, granted Megan temporary custody until the next hearing in 2 weeks. I felt my world collapse, the floor seeming to tilt beneath my feet. Paul tried to argue, but the judge had decided. Her gavel came down with finality. Liam would go home with Megan that day. We had 2 hours to pack his things and drop him off. I spent those 2 hours crying, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. Ryan packed while I held Liam, memorizing the weight of him, the smell of his hair. He kept asking why he had to go, his voice getting smaller with each question. I couldn't give him a real answer, just kept saying it was only for a little while, the lie burning my throat. When we pulled up to Megan's house, she was waiting outside, still in her court dress but smoking a cigarette, the maternal facade already crumbling. She flicked it away as we approached, the butt still smoldering on her dead lawn. Liam death gripped my hand, his whole body trembling. I knelt down and promised I'd see him soon, told him to be brave, to remember that we loved him. He nodded, but tears were streaming down his face, leaving clean tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. Megan grabbed his hand roughly and yanked him toward the house, her nails digging into his small wrist. Didn't even let him say goodbye to Ryan. As they reached the door, she turned back with a nasty smile, the real Megan finally showing through. Told you not to mess with me, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Then they were gone, the door slamming shut like a prison cell. I sat in the car and sobbed while Ryan rubbed my back. Ryan drove home in silence, his jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. The house felt empty without Liam, like all the air had been sucked out. His coloring books were still on the table, open to a half-finished picture of a rainbow. His favorite stuffed dinosaur on the guest bed, one eye missing from too much love. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just kept replaying the hearing in my head. How had it gone so wrong? How had lies won over truth? 3 days later, I drove by Megan's house, just to check. I parked across the street, feeling like a stalker but not caring. Her car wasn't there, but I could see Liam in the window, his small face pressed against the glass. He looked okay, sad, but okay. No visible bruises. I wanted to knock, to hug him, to take him home where he belonged, but knew that would make things worse, would give Derek more ammunition. I drove away feeling helpless, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night Paul called. He'd been investigating Thomas's testimony, working late hours for free because he believed in our case. Found out Thomas owed Megan money, a lot of money. Gambling debts from her ex-boyfriend's poker games, IOUs that went back years. We had our leverage. Paul said to be patient, to trust the system. Said things would turn around at the next hearing. I wanted to believe him. A week passed with no word. I texted Megan asking about Liam, keeping my messages neutral and polite. No response. I called child services for updates. They said the case was progressing. Bureaucratic speak for nothing, whatever that meant. Ryan tried to keep me distracted, but I was a mess. Couldn't focus at work, snapped at everyone, forgot important meetings. My boss gave me a warning, said I needed to get it together. I didn't care about the job. All I cared about was getting Liam back. Then everything changed. It was midnight when the doorbell rang, the sound cutting through the quiet house like a scream. Ryan grabbed a baseball bat from the closet, thinking it was a burglar or something. But when I opened the door, there was Liam, alone, in his pajamas, with a black eye that made my blood run cold. I pulled him inside immediately, scooping him into my arms. He was shivering and crying, his whole body shaking with sobs. His pajamas were dirty and too small, like he'd been wearing them for days. I wrapped him in a blanket while Ryan locked the door, checking the street for any sign of Megan. When I asked what happened, Liam could barely speak through his tears. His words came out in hiccups and gasps. Finally, he managed to tell us. Mommy's new friend Brett had hit him, said he was being too loud watching TV. Megan had told him to stop crying or Brett would hit him again. So he'd waited until they were asleep, listening to their snores, and snuck out the back door. Walked 8 blocks in the dark to our house, navigating by memory and streetlights. 4 years old, 8 blocks, alone, in the middle of the night. My hands shook as I examined his eye. It was swollen almost shut, purple and angry. Ryan took photos while I held Liam, evidence captured in harsh kitchen light. We needed evidence. We needed proof that couldn't be denied. I called 911, my voice surprisingly steady. Told them about the assault and that Liam had fled to our house for safety. They sent an officer and an ambulance, sirens cutting through the night. The EMTs checked Liam over with gentle hands, documenting every bruise with clinical precision. There were more than just the eye. Finger marks on his arms where someone had grabbed him. A bruise on his back shaped like a boot print. They said none needed immediate hospital care, but recommended we follow up with his pediatrician first thing in the morning. The officer took our statements and photos, his face grim. Said they'd investigate immediately, that crimes against children were top priority. I asked if Liam could stay with us. He said given the circumstances, yes, at least until child services reviewed the case in the morning. We put Liam back in the guest room, his room. This time I stayed with him until he fell asleep, sitting on the floor beside his bed. He held my hand so tight it hurt, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. In the morning, I called Paul before Megan even woke up. He said to document everything and file an emergency custody petition immediately. Said the black eye changed everything. Physical abuse was a line no judge could ignore. We spent the morning at his office, filling out paperwork while Liam colored quietly in the corner, flinching whenever someone walked by too fast. It unalived me to see him so scared, so different from the giggling boy who'd watched cartoons just days before. By noon, Megan had discovered Liam was gone. She called me screaming, her voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. ear, said I'd kidnapped him again, said she'd have me arrested for interference with custody. I told her about the black eye, about Brett, and hung up. She called back 20 times in 10 minutes. I didn't answer. Then she showed up at our house with Brett, their car screeching into our driveway. Ryan met them at the door while I kept Liam in the back room, holding him while he shook. I could hear Megan screaming about her rights, about how we'd pay for this. Brett was yelling too, calling us names I won't repeat, threats that made my skin crawl. Ryan stayed calm, told them to leave or he'd call the police. They didn't leave. Ryan called the police. The same officer from the night before showed up, already familiar with the situation. He recognized Brett immediately, his face hardening. Turns out Brett had a record: assault, substance possession, DUI, domestic violence. The officer told them both to leave and not come back. Said if they tried to take Liam, they'd be arrested for child endangerment. Megan went ballistic, started throwing things from her purse at our house: lipstick, keys, even her phone, which shattered on the concrete. The officer had enough. He cuffed her for disorderly conduct, the metal clicking with finality. Brett tried to intervene and got cuffed too, shouting about police brutality. As they were loaded into the patrol car, Megan screamed that this wasn't over, that she'd destroy me, ruin my life, take everything I loved. I believed her, but I didn't care. Liam was safe. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Paul said we had a strong case now. Physical abuse documented by professionals, criminal records, the midnight escape that showed Liam's desperation. But he warned me Megan would come out swinging. Sure enough, the next day Derek filed countercharges. Claimed I'd coached Liam to lie about the abuse. Said I'd caused the bruises myself to frame Brett, that I was that desperate to keep Liam. Even alleged I'd planted substances in Megan's house during previous visits. It was insane, but I knew some judges might consider it. Paul told me not to worry. Said Derek was desperate, throwing everything at the wall hoping something would stick. But I was worried. Megan had already proven she'd lie about anything, and Derek knew how to make lies sound like truth. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on Liam every hour, making sure he was still there, still safe, still breathing. Ryan tried to reassure me, but I could see he was worried too. The tension in his shoulders, the way he kept checking the locks. We'd already lost once. What if we lost again? What if the judge believed Derek's lies? What if Liam had to go back to that house with Brett? I made myself sick thinking about it, running to the bathroom twice. In the morning, I threw up twice more before we even left for court, but I put on my brave face for Liam, told him everything would be okay, prayed I was right this time. This time we were ready for Derek's tricks. Paul had spent days preparing, barely sleeping. He'd interviewed neighbors who'd seen Megan's neglect, people who'd wondered why Liam was always at our house, found records of missed doctor appointments, immunizations Liam had almost missed if I hadn't taken him. Even got Brett's ex-girlfriend to write a statement about his violence, about the reason she'd fled with their daughter. We had a solid case built on facts, not fiction. But when we walked into the courtroom, I saw Megan's secret weapon, her mother, my mother, sitting right behind her, glaring at me with familiar disappointment. I hadn't seen her in 2 years, not since she'd taken Megan's side in our last fight, choosing her golden child over truth. Now she was here to support the daughter who'd abandoned her grandson. Of course she was. The judge was different this time. A younger man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, checking his watch repeatedly. He rushed through the preliminaries and asked Derek to present. Derek stood and immediately went on the attack. Said I was a vindictive sister who'd always resented Megan's motherhood. Said I'd manipulated a confused child into telling lies for attention. He presented affidavits from Megan and Brett denying any abuse, notarized lies on official paper. Then he called our mother to testify. She took the stand and lied through her teeth with practiced ease. Said I'd always been unstable, jealous, difficult. Said she'd seen me drinking heavily around Liam at family gatherings that never happened. Said Megan was a wonderful mother who just needed support, not judgment. Every word was a knife in my back, each lie cutting deeper than the last. Paul cross-examined her hard, his youth falling away as he found his courtroom voice. Asked why she hadn't seen Liam in 6 months if Megan was such a good mother. Asked why she'd never called child services if she thought I was drinking around him. Asked why there were no photos of her with Liam from the past year. She fumbled for answers, contradicting herself repeatedly, her story falling apart, but the damage was done. Our own mother had testified against me. The judge looked troubled, making notes. Then Paul presented our evidence. The photos of Liam's bruises, each one documented and dated. The police reports written in official language that couldn't be disputed. The record of Brett's violence stretching back years. He called the EMT who'd examined Liam. The man testified clearly about the injuries, said they were consistent with abuse, not accidents. Derek objected repeatedly, but the EMT was a professional. His testimony carried weight that lies couldn't match. Then came the moment I'd dreaded. Liam had to testify. The judge cleared the courtroom of everyone except essential parties, making it less intimidating. Liam sat in a special chair, clutching his dinosaur, looking so small. The judge asked him gentle questions about what happened, his voice soft and patient. Liam told the truth in the simple, honest way only children can. Said Brett hit him when he spilled juice on the carpet. Said mommy told him not to cry or it would be worse. Said he was scared and ran to Aunt Emma's house because that's where he felt safe. He was so brave, so honest. Even Derek couldn't shake his testimony, couldn't make a 4-year-old sound like a liar. When it was over, Liam ran to me. The judge allowed it. Let him sit on my lap for the rest of the hearing, a small kindness that meant everything. Paul's closing argument was passionate. He talked about a little boy who'd been failed by his mother repeatedly, who'd been left alone, neglected, and finally abused, who'd found safety with his aunt and uncle only to be dragged back into danger. He asked the judge to protect Liam, not enable his abuser, to see through the lies to the truth written in bruises on a child's body. Derek's closing was all emotion and manipulation. He talked about a mother's love and second chances. Said foster care statistics proved children did better with biological parents, quoted studies and percentages. It might have worked if Liam hadn't been sitting right there with a black eye. The evidence impossible to ignore. The judge deliberated for an hour, the longest hour of my life. Liam fell asleep in my arms while we waited, trusting me to keep him safe. Finally, the judge returned. He granted us temporary custody with a clear path to permanent adoption if Megan didn't comply with requirements. Said Megan could have supervised visitation only, 1 hour a week at a county facility. Required her to take parenting classes and undergo psychological evaluation. Brett was banned from any contact with Liam, a restraining order to be issued immediately. Megan exploded, started screaming about her rights, about corruption, about me poisoning her son against her. The judge threatened contempt charges, his patience exhausted. Derek managed to calm her down and get her out of the courtroom, practically dragging her. As they left, she shot me a look of pure hatred that promised this wasn't over. I knew she'd be back. She'd appeal, she'd lie, she'd manipulate, but for now, Liam was safe. He was ours. That's all that mattered. I held him tighter and let myself breathe for the first time in weeks. The drive home from court felt surreal. Liam was officially ours, at least temporarily. He sat in his booster seat humming some song from a cartoon, like the whole nightmare hadn't happened. Ryan kept glancing at me with this relieved smile. I couldn't stop checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Megan's car following us, but the road stayed clear. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. Liam got chocolate with sprinkles, and it dripped all over his shirt. He laughed for the first time in days. That sound was worth more than anything. That night we had a little celebration, just the 3 of us. Pizza and Liam's favorite movie about talking cars. He fell asleep between us on the couch, one hand clutching Ryan's shirt, the other holding mine. We carried carried him to bed together, tucking him in with extra care. I must have checked on him 10 times that night, each time finding him safe and sound, spread out like a starfish with his dinosaur. The next morning, Paul called with bad news. Megan had already filed an appeal. Derek was claiming judicial bias and procedural errors, said the judge rushed the decision without considering all evidence. Paul said not to worry, that appeals rarely worked in these cases, but I could hear the concern in his voice. Derek was good at finding loopholes. We'd won a battle, but the war wasn't over. 2 days later, things got worse. I was at work when my boss Ralph called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, wouldn't meet my eyes, said he'd received a call from someone claiming I was under investigation for child abuse, that I was mentally unstable and dangerous. He didn't believe it, but corporate policy required him to place me on administrative leave pending investigation. I knew immediately it was Megan, or Derek, probably both. They were trying to destroy my credibility before the appeal. Ryan found a threatening note on his car that same day. Cut out magazine letters like some bad movie. Said we'd regret stealing Liam, that we'd pay for ruining Megan's life. We took it to the police, but they said without proof it was from Megan. They couldn't do much. Just add it to the file. The officer suggested we get security cameras. We installed them that weekend, covering every angle of our property. The supervised visitation started the next week. I had to drop Liam at the county facility every Saturday. He cried the whole drive there, begging not to go. The supervisor was nice, a woman named Deborah who'd seen it all. She promised to keep him safe. The visits were only an hour, but felt like forever. I'd sit in the parking lot the whole time watching the clock. When Liam came out, he'd run to me like he'd been gone for days. Megan used those visits to mess with his head, told him I was keeping him prisoner, that she was fighting to save him, that soon he'd come home and everything would be better. The supervisor documented everything, but the damage was done. Liam started having nightmares again, wetting the bed, asking if he was bad for not wanting to live with mommy. We got him into therapy with a child psychologist named Dr. Hannah. She was amazing with him, using play therapy to help him process everything. 3 weeks after the hearing, our security cameras caught something interesting. Brett sneaking around our house at 2 a.m., trying car doors and checking windows. He was clearly hammered, stumbling and cursing. The footage was crystal clear. We called the police immediately. They arrested him for attempted burglary and violating the restraining order. Turns out he had meth in his pocket too. He was looking at serious jail time. Megan went ballistic when Brett got arrested, called me screaming that I'd set him up, said I'd planted the substances just like she'd accused me of before. I recorded the whole call, every unhinged word. Paul said it was gold for our case. Showed her true colors. She was spiraling without Brett, her muscle and substance connection gone. The next supervised visit, she showed up high. Pupils dilated, jaw clenching, talking too fast. Deborah documented everything and called it off after 20 minutes. That's when things escalated. I was grocery shopping with Liam when I noticed my car making weird noises. Something felt off with the steering. We made it home, but I called our mechanic friend Willie to check it out. He found the problem immediately. Someone had loosened the lug nuts on my front tire. A few more miles and the wheel would have come off. Could have unalived us both. Willie said it looked deliberate, not wear and tear. We filed another police report. Ryan was furious. Wanted to confront Megan directly. I had to physically stop him from driving to her house. We couldn't give her any ammunition for the appeal. Had to play it smart. Paul advised us to hire a private investigator. Said we needed to build an airtight case for permanent custody. The PI was expensive, but Ryan's parents helped. They'd grown to love Liam like their own grandchild. The PI's name was Robert. Different Robert, not the lying neighbor. Former cop who knew how to dig up dirt legally. Within a week, he had interesting information. Megan had been collecting disability benefits for Liam. Claimed he had severe autism that required constant care, but she'd been pocketing the money instead of getting him therapy. Never took him to any appointments. The fraud went back 2 years. Thousands of dollars stolen from a program meant to help kids. We also learned about Brett's mechanic friend, a guy named Parker, who'd been seen near our house the night before my car trouble. The same Parker who'd done time for insurance fraud involving staged accidents. The pieces were falling into place. Robert kept digging while we prepared for the appeal hearing. He was worth every penny, finding things we never could have discovered ourselves. Meanwhile, Liam was thriving despite everything. His bruises healed and his confidence grew. He made friends at the park, learned to ride a bike with training wheels, started reading simple books. Every milestone felt like a victory. Ryan taught him to play catch in the backyard. I read him stories every night, doing all the voices until he giggled. We were becoming a real family. The appeal hearing was set for 6 weeks after the original decision. Paul had us prepare even more thoroughly. We had Liam's therapist ready to testify about his progress with us versus his trauma responses to Megan. Had the supervisor's reports from the disastrous visits. Had the arrest records, the security footage, the mechanic's statement about my sabotaged car. But Derek had tricks too. A week before the hearing, Megan's neighbor Martha, not the social worker, contacted Paul. Said Megan had approached her about lying in court. Offered her $500 to say she'd seen me giving Liam alcohol. Martha was a recovering alcoholic who'd worked hard to rebuild her life. She was offended by the offer and wanted to help us. Said she'd testify about Megan's real parenting. The parties, the men coming and going, the times she'd heard Liam crying alone. Then Robert hit the jackpot. Found out Megan had done this before, not with a kid, but with her ex-boyfriend's dog. Claimed he'd abused it to get custody in their breakup, then sold it a week later. The pattern was clear. She used custody as a weapon, not because she actually wanted responsibility. We had the receipts, the testimony from the ex, even the ad where she'd sold the dog. 3 days before the appeal, Derek tried one last dirty trick. He filed a motion claiming I'd been coaching Liam to lie. Said he had proof. The proof was a heavily edited audio recording of me talking to Liam about the court. Made it sound like I was telling him what to say. But we had the full recording from our security system. Showed Derek's version was chopped up and rearranged. Paul filed charges for evidence tampering. The night before the appeal, I couldn't eat. Kept running through everything that could go wrong. What if the judge believed Derek's lies? What if they gave Liam back to Megan? Ryan held me while I cried, promising everything would work out. Liam must have sensed our stress because he crawled into our bed around midnight. We all slept huddled together, like circling the wagons against danger. The appeal hearing was in a bigger courtroom, more formal, more intimidating. The judge was an older man with kind eyes but a stern expression. He'd clearly reviewed everything thoroughly, asking specific questions about details from months ago. Derek came out swinging but seemed off his game, kept shuffling papers and repeating himself. Found out later he was being investigated by the Bar Association for his evidence tampering. When Robert testified about the disability fraud, Megan's face went white. She hadn't known we knew. The judge asked her directly about the benefits. She stammered and looked at Derek, who objected on grounds of relevance. But fraud involving the child was definitely relevant. The judge overruled him and demanded an answer. Megan tried to lie, but Robert had documents. Check stubs, bank records, forged therapy notes. It was over. Then Martha testified about Megan's attempt to bribe her, produced text messages where Megan offered money for false testimony. The judge's face got darker with every revelation. When Dr. Hannah testified about Liam's trauma and recovery, several people in the gallery teared up. She explained how he'd gone from a scared, withdrawn child to a happy, thriving boy, all because he finally felt safe. Derek's closing argument was desperate. He attacked everyone's credibility, claimed conspiracy, even suggested judicial corruption. It was painful to watch. Paul's closing was simple and powerful. He laid out the pattern of abuse, neglect, fraud, and manipulation. Asked the judge to protect Liam from a mother who saw him him as a paycheck and weapon, not a child. The judge didn't need long to decide. He terminated Megan's parental rights completely, cited the fraud, the bribery attempts, the child endangerment, the false accusations, said she'd shown a pattern of behavior that made her unfit to parent, ordered her to pay back the fraudulent benefits and face criminal charges, approved our petition to adopt Liam officially, even waived the usual waiting periods given the circumstances. We'd won, really won, permanently. Megan didn't scream this time, just stared at me with dead eyes while Derek packed up his briefcase. As she walked past our table, she leaned down and whispered that she'd make me pay someday. Security moved her along before she could say more. I didn't care about her threats anymore. Liam was safe, that's all that mattered. The adoption was finalized 2 months later. Same courthouse, but a different feeling entirely. Liam wore a little suit and tie, grinning the whole time. When the judge declared him officially our son, he jumped into our arms yelling, "I have a real family now!" There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the bailiff was sniffling.